Millionaire CEO took the nanny to a company gala. She wasn't supposed to speak, but she did. Lillian didn't blink when he said it. "You're coming with me to the gala." His voice was flat, like it wasn't a request, like she didn't have a choice. She was kneeling on the floor with Leo, holding a giraffe-shaped puzzle piece. The boy was smiling. The room smelled like popcorn and baby shampoo. But Oliver Blackwell stood at the doorway like a storm had walked in. She stood up slowly, still holding the piece. "I'm the nanny," she said. "Tonight, you're not." That was the moment. The moment everything that had been quiet in her life decided to speak. He turned to leave, already assuming she'd follow. But Lillian stayed frozen, not out of fear, out of fury, out of something else she hadn't named yet. Not yet, but she would. And when she did, the whole boardroom would remember it, the pain beneath her calm. It wasn't the request that got to her. It was the assumption. Like her time didn't matter. Like her identity was disposable. Lillian Cruz had gotten used to that. Being the afterthought, the background. The girl who gave up her degree. Who nursed her mother through chemo with one hand and held down 3 jobs with the other. Who learned how to look polished on $10 and 2 hours of sleep. She wasn't used to being seen, not really. Until a man in a designer suit barged into her new job with demands. Oliver Blackwell didn't look like a man who heard no very often. And Lillian, well, she didn't give it easily. But tonight was different. He'd already arranged a stylist, booked a car, cleared her schedule. Like she was just another item on his agenda. She stared at the door after he left. Heart racing, jaw tight. And for the first time in a long time, she asked herself, when did I start letting people talk to me like that? At 7:05 p.m., a whirlwind named Grace arrived. Stylist, hairpins in her teeth, determination in her eyes. "Miss Cruz, tonight you're going to shut the place down." Lillian raised an eyebrow. "With what?" Grace smiled. "With what they never expect, raw, beautiful substance." By 7:50, the transformation was quiet, but complete. Loose waves, soft makeup, a red dress that didn't scream for attention, it whispered, "I'm done hiding." She walked down the stairs of the Blackwell home, and for a moment, Oliver froze. He didn't say a word, didn't smile. She didn't offer a compliment. Just, "You look acceptable." She tilted her head. "Not bad for a nanny, huh?" He offered his arm. She took it, but not like a woman being led. Like a woman choosing to walk beside someone she didn't yet trust. As the car pulled away, she whispered to herself, "This is just one night, a performance. Don't let it matter." But deep down, Lillian knew better. Tonight was more than a gala. It was a line. And once she crossed it, there'd be no going back. Chapter 1. A Nanny in Red. The Westwood Hotel Ballroom, Manhattan. From underestimated to unforgettable. When she walked in, it was like the air forgot how to move. She didn't mean to silence the room. But when Lillian Cruz walked into the ballroom, red fabric floating around her ankles, shoulders bare, eyes steady. Something about her said, "I don't need permission to exist here." Oliver Blackwell walked beside her, every inch the cold-blooded CEO. But even he paused for a second before offering his hand at the entrance. "Remember," he murmured, "just smile and don't spill wine on anyone." She gave a quiet laugh. "I'll try not to embarrass you." But in the next 2 hours, she'd do much more than that. Crystal chandeliers, white marble floors, waiters in crisp black. It was everything Lillian wasn't born into. But she'd seen enough of the world to know. People who matter don't always look like they belong. And people who belong, oh, it always matter. "Lillian Cruz," she whispered under her breath, adjusting the simple silver earrings Grace had picked. "You are not small." Then came her. Meredith Kensington, perfect in a navy sheath dress. Lips like steel, eyes like judgment. "Oh," she said, sipping champagne. "Did you bring a date, Oliver?" Just a nod from him. No introductions. So Lillian stepped forward, hand extended, calm, confident. "Vera, Lillian Cruz, nice to meet you." Meredith's fingers barely grazed hers. Interesting color choice. Reds. Very noticeable. Lillian smiled without a flinch. Being invisible never really appealed to me. The first battle was quiet, but won. As they moved deeper into the room, Oliver looked at her sideways. "You're enjoying this," he said under his breath. "Surviving it," she replied, eyes scanning the crowd. "Difference?" And then came the unexpected moment, the pivot. A French investor approached. "Rates Mr. Beaumont. Charming. Cute. I've heard so much," he said, taking her hand. "Do you work in development?" Oliver opened his mouth to correct him, but Lillian beat him to it. "I follow the company's social projects, especially the ones on accessibility. I believe progress means nothing if it excludes the people it claims to help." She spoke simply, clearly, from a place of experience, not pretense. Mentioned a Parisian solar co-op project. Cited data from a recent report, one she'd read out of pure curiosity during nap time. Billman's eyes lit up. Meredith's lips tightened. Oliver said nothing. He just stared. At the woman he'd underestimated. At the intelligence she'd never flashed but always had. As they returned to their table, Oliver leaned in slightly. "Where did you learn about community energy?" "I haven't always been a nanny," she said, lifting her water glass. "I had plans before I had to start surviving." He didn't ask more, but he listened. And Lillian noticed. That was new. The evening progressed like clockwork. Speeches, applause, toasts. But wherever Lillian moved, eyes followed. Not because of the dress, but because of the presence. She was poised, thoughtful, and when someone asked her what she did, she smiled. Whatever needs doing. By dessert, she had 2 business cards tucked into her clutch. By the end of the night, 4 executives had asked who she was. And Oliver? He hadn't stopped watching her since Beaumont. "You're quiet," she murmured in the car ride home. "I didn't expect tonight to go this way," he admitted. She looked out the window at the passing lights. "Neither did I, but I think it was time the world saw me." He turned slightly. "Do you want it to keep seeing you?" She met his eyes. Not coy, not flirtatious, just steady. "Depends on whether the world's ready to listen." They pulled into the driveway in silence. But something had already changed. Not just in her, in him too. She wasn't just the nanny anymore. She was the woman they'd remember, even after the champagne wore off. Have you ever been underestimated and then reminded them who you are? Chapter 2, The Agreement. Blackwell Brownstone next morning, corporate office. From tension to boundaries, to the unspoken flicker of something deeper. He offered her a contract, but she gave him terms. The morning after the gala, Lillian found Leo in the kitchen, covered in pancake batter and chocolate chips. "Did you win the party?" he asked through a mouthful of strawberries. She smiled. "Not sure, but I didn't lose." Leo nodded seriously, as if that mattered deeply. Then Oliver walked in. Pressed shirt, rolled cuffs, coffee in one hand. He didn't say good morning. "We need to talk, privately." Lillian followed him to the sunroom, bracing herself. He turned, unreadable as ever. "Last night went better than expected." She raised an eyebrow. "You mean I didn't spill wine on anyone?" He ignored the sarcasm. "The investors were impressed. They liked you. You helped the company's image, and mine." She waited, arms folded. "I want to make you an offer, a deal." Lillian blinked. "Are you asking me for a raise?" "No," he said. "I'm asking you to keep pretending to be my girlfriend for 2 months." The silence between them thickened. She laughed. Once, dry. "You're kidding." "I'm not. There are more galas, events, public appearances. I need someone with presence, someone who already proved they can handle it." She stared at him like he was made of static. "You want a pretend relationship, to impress your board?" He nodded. "I'll compensate you well. A bonus, an upgraded contract, public discretion, and full privacy, of course." Lillian took a long breath, then stepped closer. "Here are my conditions." Oliver blinked. "Home and alive. I get full autonomy with Leo, he's my priority. 2. I wear what I want, coffee shop or charity ball. 3. No orders outside this agreement. And 4. She leaned in, voice low. I decide when the act ends. He studied her. Really studied her. This woman was not the fallback choice. She was fire and soft waves and a red dress. He nodded. Dear. She extended her hand. They shook, and in that second, a flicker. Not attraction. Not yet. Something more dangerous. Possibility. Later that afternoon, they stood side by side again, this time for a photo shoot for a philanthropy feature. She stood behind him in a crisp blazer, hair tucked in a braid. Nothing loud, but the camera loved her. You clean up well, he muttered. She smiled without looking at him. You're welcome. Over the next few weeks, Lillian moved through Oliver's world like a quiet revolution. She attended a yacht brunch with European investors. She wore flats to a skyscraper launch and laughed when someone mistook her for a CEO. She showed up to charity board meetings with no makeup and sharper insights than anyone at the table. At home, she taught Leo to make shadow puppets and turned bath time into Broadway. Oliver watched it all, from behind his glass walls, from his perfect silence. She didn't try to impress him, and maybe that's why he couldn't look away. One night, after a fundraiser where she outspoke a hedge fund chair about poverty metrics, they sat in a car in silence. Where did you learn all that? He asked. She shrugged. When you've lived paycheck to paycheck, numbers stop being abstract. He looked at her. Not the woman in the dress, but the woman who survived and still smiled. Later, when Leo fell asleep with one of her lullabies in his ears, Oliver stood at the door, listening. Something in him softened. But when she walked past him, brushing her fingers along the wall like she always did, he felt the distance between them. All contract, all rules. And still, something inside him whispered, You already broke one. You started caring. Their hands met in agreement, but their eyes said something neither could name. Have you ever agreed to something and felt your heart get involved anyway? Chapter 3. Between Floors. Blackwell Holdings elevator, early evening. From awkward proximity to emotional intimacy. The elevator stopped. Not just the metal, but everything between them. It was supposed to be a short ride. Just from the 25th floor down to the lobby. She was heading home. He was done for the day. They'd shared that elevator dozens of times by now. Silent rides, polite nods, distance well kept. But this time, the lights flickered. The Hume stuttered, and the elevator jerked to a dead stop. Lillian grabbed the side rail. Please tell me that was planned. Oliver checked the panel. Emergency brake. Generator must have failed. She tilted her head. Let me guess. That's never happened before. He exhaled. Not with me inside. She chuckled softly. Perfect. My first year faking a relationship. And now I'm stuck in a box with my fake boyfriend. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged. Lillian leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I always carry snacks. You? He glanced over. No. Then you've clearly never been poor. Oliver turned, eyebrows raised. She offered a tiny smile. Lesson 1. After 5 p.m., snacks become survival. He nodded like he was writing it down. Got it. She looked at him then. Really looked. Not the tailored suit, not the CEO. Just a man, pressed too tightly by expectations. You know, she said, I used to think men like you only existed in stock photos. He tilted his head. Arrogant? No, hollow, polished, but empty. She paused. But you surprise me sometimes. That landed somewhere deeper than it should have. Oliver sank to the floor, back against the metal wall. She followed, sitting across from him. 2 feet between them, 2 very different worlds. But somehow, it didn't feel that far. Can I ask you something? She said after a minute. He nodded. Are you ever afraid of not being enough? Even when you have everything? He hesitated. Then, voice low, yes. She met his eyes. Me too. They sat there in the hum of emergency lights. Time slowed. Truth softened them both. He looked over. "You hide it well." "So do you," she whispered. The elevator shuddered again. Lights blinked back to full brightness. The movement resumed. They stood up, slowly, brushing invisible dust off themselves. Just before the doors opened, Oliver turned. Voice quiet. "Sometimes what we think we know isn't even half the story." Lillian didn't answer. She just nodded, because she knew that wasn't about the elevator. And it wasn't the last time he'd surprise her. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore, it was honest. Have you ever connected with someone in a place you least expected? Chapter 4. The Silence That Hurt. Luxor Dining Hall, Midtown Manhattan. Formal dinner event. From confidence, public humiliation, heartbreak. She waited for him to speak. Just one word. A hand? Anything, but the man who held her contract held nothing at all. The invitation said business formal. Lillian wore navy blue with a single pearl at her neck. Nothing loud, nothing fake. She arrived right on time, with signed documents for Oliver's assistant, nothing more. She hadn't planned to stay. But the moment she stepped into the Luxor's shimmering dining room, eyes, tension, and Meredith Kensington in full form. "Oh, what a coincidence," Meredith said, swirling her wine. "We were just talking about you." William paused. "Never let them see the sting." She smiled faintly. "I hope it was something useful." Meredith turned toward the table of executives and international investors. British, French, Japanese, all watching now. "I was just explaining," Meredith said, loud enough for the next table to hear, "that you're actually little Leo's nanny." Silence. Not even the pianist touched the keys. Lillian swallowed. And then she stood taller. "Yes," she said, voice steady. "I am a nanny. I'm also a former waitress, a caregiver, and a cashier. I folded shirts in department stores and cleaned houses. I've done whatever it took, and I always gave my best." She turned. She looked at Oliver. Waited. For a nod. For a word. For him to be the man she thought he was. He didn't move. He didn't say anything. And somehow, that hurt more than Meredith's smirk. More than the whispers. More than the wine she suddenly tasted in the back of her throat without ever drinking it. She nodded, once. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for reminding me where I came from, and especially where I don't want to stay." Then she turned and walked out. No trembling, no tears, but something inside her shattered anyway. Back in the hallway, she pressed her back to the cold marble. Her fingers shook, clenching the folder she'd brought. It was always going to end like this, she thought. I just didn't think it would be in front of a room full of strangers. Behind her, the gala continued. Laughter resumed. Champagne flowed. And Oliver? He sat there, frozen, ashamed, but too slow. Later that night, back at her room in the staff apartment, Lillian opened her laptop. An email had arrived. Subject: Proposal, Vita Plano Foundation. Vadi, we were deeply moved by your Horizon presentation. We'd like to invite you to Boston to lead a national community development program. She stared at it for a long time. A real job, a real title, a real life, something she hadn't dared to dream of anymore. She closed the laptop gently and whispered. It took breaking to feel this scene. Most had the chance to defend her and said nothing. And silence, when it matters most, is betrayal. Have you ever walked away not because you wanted to, but because you weren't worth staying for in their eyes? Chapter 5. Everything she was. Brooklyn, Crown Heights neighborhood, former community center, her sister's porch. Miranda thought she was a role, a moment. But the walls she built were made from everything she gave up to survive. He told himself it was just curiosity. That's what he said as he typed her address into his car's GPS. That's what he repeated when he crossed the bridge from Manhattan into Brooklyn. But the truth was quieter than that. He couldn't stop seeing her face. when he didn't say a word. The neighborhood was nothing like his world. No glass towers, no valet parking, just corner stores, chalk drawings on sidewalks, families yelling across porches. He parked outside a modest brick building with a faded sign, Viva Vake Community Uplift Center. A mural stretched across the front, kids' drawings, handprints, a quote, "Dignity is not charity, it's a right." And in one photo near the door, there she was. Lillian, smiling, arm around an elderly woman, surrounded by kids, alive in a way Oliver had never seen. An older woman welcomed him inside. "You looking for someone?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. He hesitated. "Lillian Cruz." The woman's face softened instantly. "Oh, she doesn't live here anymore. But she started all this." She led him through the rooms. Small classrooms with folding chairs, a play area, a kitchen with bulk rice and dry beans stacked neatly. "This whole thing?" the woman said, pride in her voice. She pulled it together, with nothing but donated paper and grit. They told him stories. How Lillian taught free math classes in the morning, cared for elders in the afternoon, and baked bread at night to pay rent. How she led the evacuation during a gas leak and called every parent herself to make sure the kids were safe. How she stayed when it got hard. Each word was a stone, rebuilding her in his mind. Not the woman in heels beside him at a gala, but the one with her hands in dough and her heart in the room. One of the volunteers offered to take him to her old house. He found her younger sister Clara sitting on the porch with textbooks. She had the same eyes, fierce, tired, awake. "You must be Oliver," she said, without smiling. "She told you about me?" "Plenty, not all of it was praise." He nodded. "I deserve that." Clara stood and folded her arms. "She cared about you, that's what made it worse. She didn't expect you to protect her from the world. She just hoped you wouldn't be part of what hurt her." Oliver said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like an excuse. He looked around at the cracked steps, the sagging porch swing, the homemade herb garden. The world Lillian came from. The one she'd built and rebuilt with nothing but will. Back in his car, he sat with the folder she'd left on his desk. Portfolio, Lillian Cruz. Inside, diagrams, programs, grants, redevelopment plans. Each page in her handwriting. Dreams she hadn't shared. Because no one asked. Because maybe she'd stopped believing anyone would listen. Back at the penthouse, Leo tugged at his sleeve. It was the master bed. "Dad, where's Lillian?" Oliver swallowed hard. "She had to go, buddy." Leo looked down. "I wanted to show her the dinosaur I drew." "She would have liked that," Oliver said quietly. And when Leo wasn't looking, he whispered, "I wanted to show her who I am too, but I was too late." She wasn't just someone who filled a space in his life. She was someone who had built a whole world and invited him to notice. Has anyone ever seen only one side of you when there was a whole story underneath? Chapter 6. The $20 million 0-cents speech. Blackwell Holdings boardroom investor presentation. She wasn't even on the schedule, but by the end of the meeting, no one remembered who was. Oliver wasn't known for panic. But that morning, he nearly knocked over a chair when the call came through. "Appendicitis," his assistant said. "David's in surgery. He can't present." David, the only executive who knew the Horizon project like the back of his hand. A $20 million 0-cents presentation, 30 minutes. International investors were already on their way upstairs. Oliver stood in his glass office, staring out at the skyline, gripping the edge of his desk. Then, he heard a knock. Lillian, in jeans, holding a folder filled with Leo's chalk drawings. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "No," he admitted. "Everything's falling apart." She stepped in, laid the folder gently on his desk. "What's wrong?" "Our lead presenter is out. Horizon's hanging by a thread. I have no one." He didn't expect the words that came next. "I can do it," she said. He blinked. "Do what?" She didn't laugh, didn't back down. "I've read the reports, the blueprints, the budget projections. But more than that, I know what the project means." They stared. You don't have presentation experience. You don't have many options, she said, calmly. And in that moment, Oliver did something unfamiliar. He trusted her. 30 minutes later, she stood in front of a sea of suits. Beige blazer, white blouse, hair loose and soft. No script, no rehearsed hand gestures. Just her. "My name is Lillian Cruz," she began. "I'm not an architect or an economist, but I know exactly what it's like to grow up where cracked sidewalks teach you to jump before you can read." Slides flicked on behind her. A forgotten park, boarded buildings, kids playing on broken steps. This was my childhood, and it's why Horizon matters. She didn't talk about metrics. She talked about mothers. How they traded nights of sleep to keep the fridge full. About children who saw more concrete than grass. About dignity. How sometimes the greatest innovation is remembering that people deserve light, access, safety, beauty. Oliver watched from the side of the room. He'd never seen a room full of billionaires go so quiet. Not for numbers, but for someone's truth. And when it ended, the French investor who had once shaken her hand at the gala raised his again. "Miss Cruz?" he asked gently. "Do you speak this way because you lived it?" She didn't flinch. "Yes, that's why I believe numbers don't change reality. People do." The room erupted in applause. Oliver had never seen that. Not at Blackwell, not for anyone, and definitely not for someone without a title. When the room cleared and the investors left smiling, Lillian turned to him. "I think it worked." He looked at her like he was seeing something sacred. "You didn't just save the presentation," he said. "You transformed it." She shrugged softly. "I just told the story no one else could. Because it was mine." Later, back in her room, she opened her inbox. An official offer. National spokesperson, Vita Plano Foundation, based in Boston. Full independence, competitive salary, housing, national platform. She stared at the screen for a long time. Leo tiptoed in behind her, tugging on her sleeve. "Did you save Daddy's job today?" She smiled and pulled him into her lap, maybe just a little. He yawned. "Are you going to live here forever?" Lillian didn't answer right away. She looked out the window, where the city lights shimmered like 1,000 open doors. "I don't know, champ, but I promise, nothing really important will change." She wasn't trying to shine, she was just telling the truth. And that lit up the room more than any spotlight could. Have you ever been given 5 minutes and used it to speak for your whole life? Chapter 7. The Terms of Trust. Blackwell Holdings. New role, new floor. Community site visit. Bill offered her a corner office. She gave him a list of terms, because this time she wasn't stepping in without control. The email came 2 days later. Subject: Social Impact Coordinator, official offer. From Oliver Blackwell. Attachment: PDF, letterhead, signed. Lillian stared at it from her borrowed desk in the staff housing apartment. She'd almost left, almost started fresh in Boston. But something about how far this company had to go and how close it now was to changing, made her hesitate. And besides, she wasn't done with Leo. And she wasn't done teaching Oliver what empathy looked like in action. When she walked into Blackwell Holdings that Monday morning, no one said it out loud, but everyone stared. The girl who'd been a nanny, who'd embarrassed Meredith Kensington, which she'd disappeared after the dinner. Now she had a badge, or an official title, and she walked like she knew she belonged, because she did. Oliver met her in the 17th floor conference room. No fancy gestures. Just a folder, 2 mugs of coffee, and quiet anticipation. "Before I say yes," she said, sitting across from him, "I have a few conditions." He didn't blink. "Go ahead." Delegation. Full control of project direction, no rubber stamps, no board rewrites. 2. I build my own team, from scratch. No one you send down to babysit me. 3. No using social impact as PR fluff. I want real programs, real impact. And 4, she met his eyes. Our relationship is strictly professional. He nodded slowly. A muscle in his jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. I agree. She reached out her hand, "Then let's begin." He shook it. But for the first time in all their meetings, he didn't let go too fast. Lillian's first week as social impact coordinator was filled with noise, doubt, whispers. Some called her a puppet, others a PR stunt, but none of it stuck. Because she didn't argue. She worked. She visited every department, accounting, facilities, legal, HR, not to lecture, to listen. She built her team from voices no one had listened to. A 23-year-old Latina intern with a degree in urban planning, a former high school teacher from Harlem, a middle-aged data analyst recovering from burnout who happened to be brilliant with grant frameworks. She launched a wellness committee, began anonymous listening sessions, turned the dusty CSR corner of the company website into a hub for real community partnerships. And quietly, Blackwell Holdings began to change. Oliver kept his distance, but he saw everything. Once he passed by her office and paused in the hallway. Inside, she was standing in front of a whiteboard, sleeves rolled, marker in hand. Her laughter echoed, light, firm, leading, and he realized she didn't need permission. She needed space, and she had taken it. Weeks passed. The company's internal satisfaction scores rose. Turnover dropped. Media picked up on it. One headline read, "From Nanny to Nation Builder, Lillian Cruz quietly rewrites corporate America." Meredith saw it too, and she wasn't smiling anymore. That Friday, Lillian found a note on her desk in Oliver's handwriting. "If you're visiting the Brooklyn site tomorrow, I'd like to come. Just to observe. No suits. No speeches." Oh, she almost laughed. But she folded the note and kept it. Not because she needed him there, but because part of her wanted him to see what she was building with his resources, so he'd finally understand. It wasn't charity. It was justice, and she was just getting started. This time, she didn't ask to belong. She walked in like someone who had already earned it. Have you ever returned to a place that once broke you, just to build something stronger than they ever expected? Chapter 8. Just an Observer. Community Workshop, Crown Heights, Blackwell offices. He told him not to help, so for once, he just watched. And what he saw changed everything. The next morning, he actually showed up. No driver, no press, no security. Just Oliver Blackwell, in jeans, sneakers, and a polo shirt with the collar unpressed. Uncomfortable, but willing. Lillian barely looked up when he arrived at the community workshop. "Just observe," she said, handing him a name tag with "Volunteer Oliver" scribbled in Sharpie. No instructions, no CEO energy, just watch. He nodded, and for once, said nothing. The workshop hummed with quiet effort. Women, single mothers, caretakers, immigrants, sat at folding tables mixing essential oils and shaping soaps by hand. Another group worked on braided breads. One corner was stacked with boxes labeled for the market launch. "This is our independent circle," Lillian explained as she moved between tables. "They're learning to make and sell from scratch. The profits fund their kids' school fees, groceries, rent gaps." Oliver watched as a woman carefully poured lavender soap into a silicone mold. Her daughter sat beside her, coloring a star. "They're learning to sell a product," Lillian continued, "but more than that, they're learning to believe in themselves." He took it in silently. In his world, success came in profit margins. In hers, it came in moments like this. At one point, an older woman named Rosa walked over, flower on her cheek. "So, you're the one she works for?" Oliver nodded. "I suppose I am. Then make sure you keep her. She's gold. Not born rich, but born strong." Oliver blinked, a lump rising in his throat. "Yes, ma'am," he said softly. "I see that now." Back at Blackwell that afternoon, he stood before the board. The numbers were in. Employee retention is up 12%. Community engagement up 80%. Her brand perception revolutionized. The board applauded. But Oliver turned, motioning to Lillian at the back of the room. "This happened," he said, "because one woman taught us to listen." Some clapped. Some swallowed their pride. But no one argued. because they'd all seen what she built, and they knew it was real. That night, as Lillian packed up files from the conference room, Oliver lingered. "You did good today," he said. "I know," she replied with a tired smile. He looked at her for a long moment, and finally asked, "Do you think people are born to carry the weight of the world, or do they just have no choice?" Lillian paused. "No one's born with it, life hands it to you, and if you don't drop it, it becomes muscle." He nodded slowly. "That's how you became you." She shrugged. "Maybe, or maybe I'm just stubborn." They both laughed. Soft, dry, a little too long, and in that small flicker of warmth, something between them softened again. Not quite love, but trust, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of belief. She wasn't the woman in the red dress anymore. She was the woman rebuilding a world and letting him see it. Has someone ever shown you a world you never knew you needed to understand? Chapter 9. The Plaza Proposal. Community Plaza Festival, Brooklyn stage. Handmade booths, children's tents. Who once offered her money to pretend, but now he was asking her everything, in front of everyone. The sky over Crown Heights was the color of ripe peaches and promise. Beneath it, the community plaza buzzed with life. Tents lined the brick paths, handmade soaps, braided breads, candles that smelled like memories. Children wore shirts that read, "My future starts here." At the center, a simple wooden stage framed by garden flowers. Lillian moved through the crowd with ease, waving to grandmothers, hugging kids, adjusting a shy vendor's sign. She wasn't the guest anymore. She was the root. Oliver stood near the booths with Leo, both dressed in navy. Leo's suit was slightly wrinkled. He carried something behind his back. "Do you remember our mission?" Oliver asked softly. Leo nodded. "When you say the line, I hand her the box." Oliver smiled. "Exactly." Lillian stepped onto the stage to welcome everyone. No mic tricks, no buzzwords. Just her voice, clear and warm. "Today we celebrate what happens when women believe in their hands, their hearts, and each other." The crowd cheered. And just as she was about to step off, Oliver appeared. He climbed the steps slowly. The sun caught the silver at his temple. He wore no tie, no script. His truth. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, voice quiet but steady, "but I have something to say." Lillian froze. The crowd hushed. She blinked once, breath hitching. "I'm not speaking today as a CEO," he continued, "or a man who once didn't know how to listen. I'm speaking as someone changed by this project, and by a woman I once thought I'd hired to help my son." A ripple went through the audience. He glanced at Leo. The boy stepped forward, proud and small, and handed his father a small velvet box. Oliver knelt. Right there, on the wood, on the stage built by her dream. "Lillian Cruz," he said, eyes never leaving hers. "Would you change the rest of my life by saying yes?" She didn't speak. Not right away. Tears fell. But it wasn't sadness. It was relief. It was everything she had carried alone, finally seen. "I love you," she whispered, "and I want a real life, not a performance, not a contract, just us. Imperfect, honest." She reached down, took his hand. "This is unexpected," she laughed through her tears, "but it's absolutely real." "Then I think we need a new agreement," he said, standing. "No masks, no pretending, just us." She nodded. "I say yes." The plaza erupted. Leo shouted, "She said yes!" and jumped into their hug. Neighbors cried, children clapped. And above them, the city watched the moment unfold like something holy. Later, as the sun lowered behind tenement rooftops, the three of them sat beneath the stage. Lillian whispered, "Did you plan the whole thing?" Oliver kissed her temple. "Only with your team's full approval." "And Leo's?" He looked down at their son, his son, in every way that mattered. Especially Leo's. Held where she had once stood alone, and this time, he was the one offering everything. Has anyone ever seen all your flaws, and still chosen you anyway? With the whole world watching? Chapter 10. As Real as the Sky. Community Plaza Wedding, New York, HQ, Washington, D.C. Award ceremony. They had no aisle, no altar, just the stage she built, and a promise neither of them needed to script. They didn't rent a ballroom, didn't hire a wedding planner, didn't need to. They said their vows beneath the same flower-wrapped arch where she'd once said yes, not to a proposal, but to finally being seen. Leo wore a tiny vest and held the rings like it was a moon rock. Guests sat on folding chairs and wiped away tears with napkins from the bake tent. And Lillian walked toward the stage in a dress made by the same women she had trained. When Oliver saw her, he didn't smile. He softened, the kind of soft that only happens when you've been hard too long. Their kiss wasn't perfect. It was better than perfect. It was earned. In the months that followed, they built more than a life. They built movement. A dozen new community initiatives launched across the country. Blackwell Holdings added impact metrics to every board report. Former interns became directors. And Lillian led it all, without ever changing who she was. She still wore sneakers to site visits. Still sang Leo made-up lullabies. Still made Oliver coffee exactly how he hated it, on purpose. And he still drank it every time. Then came the envelope, gold embossed, signed by the National Committee for Sustainable Development. An invitation to Washington, D.C., to receive the country's highest honor in social innovation. The ceremony was a blur. Spotlights, applause, cameras. But Lillian only remembered one thing. At the end of the live interview, the host smiled and asked, "How did it all start?" Oliver looked at her. She answered first. "And just needed a nanny." He nodded. She just needed a chance. They said the final line together, not rehearsed. Not planned, just real. And we both needed something real. The crowd clapped, but neither of them heard it. They were too busy holding hands beneath the warm lights, looking up, at a ceiling of glass, at a sky that no longer felt too far. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real, and real is rarer than magic. What would happen if you stopped pretending and just reached for something real? Like sharing a secret with someone who needed to hear it. Rooftop at twilight, soft breeze, the hum of a city below. She once walked into a ballroom in borrowed shoes, holding her breath. That night, she wasn't sure what was real. She only knew she was tired of disappearing. And now she walks into boardrooms without flinching. Into homes with her name on the lease. Into the arms of a man who once didn't know how to look beyond the surface. But now can't stop seeing her. Not because she changed for him, but because she didn't. Because she stayed honest, stayed bold, and stayed herself. This isn't a Cinderella story. Not really. There was no magic slipper, no fairy godmother. Just a woman who carried too much for too long, and finally learned that being seen is never too much to ask. And a man who built an empire of glass, only to discover that what he needed most was someone to help him see through it. Some love stories are loud. This one was quiet, real, not perfect, but present. So if this story touched you, maybe it's because you've been the girl in borrowed shoes, or the woman no one expected to be more than help. Or maybe you've been the one who stayed silent when it mattered most. But silence doesn't have to be the end. You can speak now. You can start now. You can begin again. If this story felt like yours, let it live on. Share it with someone who still believes they're just background. Tell them, you're the main story, you always were. And if you're still wondering whether love like this exists, whether real things can grow from pretend beginnings, then maybe the next story is already on its way to find you.